Well, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, I guess, depending on exactly where you're sitting. But this is Mary Peabody, and I am coming to you today from the University of Vermont Extension, where I am the coordinator of the Women's Agricultural Network here, and also a community development specialist with UVM Extension. And marketing is my specialty and my passion, so I'm delighted to spend the next 30 minutes with you. Before we get started, I just want to say that I'm very pleased to welcome you to what is like the first of our brand new Women in Ag Learning Network webinar series, and I'm delighted to see so many of you here, and I hope that you will take us up on the offer to share your email address in the chat box sometime during the presentation. As so many of you have, we'll be happy to send you the recording, to the link to the recording so that you can use this. There's also two files in the file share box which you're welcome to download and use. And I know we have some farmers market managers here, so please feel free to share those with your vendors as they're useful. That's what it's all about. We're about sharing expertise and speaking of sharing expertise, this is only a 30-minute presentation, so it's going to go by pretty quickly. So at any time, if you have a question or if you have a tip that works particularly well for you and you want to share that in the chat box, I would encourage you to do so. We'd be thrilled to have you. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Today we're talking about one of my favorite topics. We're talking about marketing, which is a gigantic umbrella that just about everything fits into. But specifically today we're talking about sort of direct marketing, and particularly that sort of mid-season tune-up for those of you that sell at farmers markets, maybe have a farm stand or a store at your farm that you manage or that you're in charge of. So just to get us started here, and let me just, to get us started here, let's sort of, although it's midsummer here in the Northeast, there's still an awful lot of the growing season left for us, and most of the country still has an awful lot of growing season left. In fact, direct market producers indicate that while the early season sales are critical for that cash flow, because most of us come out of the winter without a whole lot of money, it's really the last third of the season that really generates that make or break budget period. So you still have an awful lot of time to make up losses, and if sales have been disappointing so far, there's still plenty of time to catch up. So I always like to do a little bit of a rah-rah talk, because I know, having spent time in the trenches at farmers markets, just exactly how much work they are. And sometimes, you look at what you take home at the end of the day, and it can be a little disappointing. So there's plenty of time to catch up. So in the direct market arena, sales don't just happen, though. We all know that. This is not like a retail or a wholesale account where somebody comes and picks up something and then sends you a check 10 days later. You have to work hard to get every buyer's attention and before you even have a shot at making the sale. So in order to make the sale, you've got to really get their attention. And competition's growing. It's growing in two ways. One is there are a lot more markets out there and a lot more farm stands out there. They're growing by leaps and bounds. There's also more vendors at a lot of the markets. So very often where you might have been the only game in town, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, you may have 3 or 4 other people selling a very similar product to you. So, you really need to stand out and you need to be aware. So the good news is that for many markets, as we approach mid and late summer, attendance at markets start to shift a bit. You'll notice a little bit of a demographic change. If your market happens to be in an area where you get a lot of tourists, which is where I live, you may start to see those numbers start to drop off and fewer tourist groups and fewer families on vacation. And then you start to see more of those sort of what I call the regular locals starting to increase. And people are also sort of starting to change their shopping patterns as well. Especially in the northern part of the country where seasons are more clearly defined and seasonal shifts are more obvious. As school starts up, people start getting back to the business of meal planning and cooking. So in many ways, I think September 1st is more of sort of a new year than January 1st is in terms of shopping demographics and direct marketing. So it's important that you be dialed into these changes so that you can use them to your advantage. So before I get into any actual tips, I have an important question that I need to put to you. And this is really this will apply as well to farmers market managers as well as to farmers. But Which one are you? So it's mid-season. Some of us, like the woman on the left, are happy and excited and thrilled. You know who these folks are. There's one at every market. Sometimes there's two or three. Being at the market energizes them, and they thrive on chaos. And it doesn't matter that they've had 2 hours of sleep, or the tractor broke down, or their best employee just quit. They're just jazzed to be at the market. So if you're one of those people, probably a lot of what I say today in the next 20 minutes or so you can disregard, because honestly you have that kind of magnetic personality that's going to draw people in anyway. And I hope you pick up a few tips, but honestly you've pretty much got this direct market game in the bag. So congratulations to you, and as long as you're paying attention to the quality of your product and your prices are within that sweet spot of consumer acceptability, you're going to do just fine. There's probably also a few of us today that are feeling a little bit more like the gal on the right. Had enough. Over it. Can't take one more demand. If there are any of you listening right now that fit that profile, I have some advice for you, but I will get to that at the end of the presentation. So just hang in there, chill out a little bit. Maybe take a 3-minute nap or something, and we'll get back. But the truth is that most of us probably land somewhere in the middle. We're not feeling all that bubbly, but we're still hanging in there. We're starting to feel that mid-season fatigue. We're not quite at the breaking point, but it wouldn't take a whole lot to put you there or put you over the edge. And for you folks and all of us that sort of fit in the middle of that bubble, I've got a few tips that will help build your sales during these peak market months. So, the first is looks. Appearance really matters in direct marketing, and all of you probably know that. It matters a lot. By now, your display has been packed up, set up, carted around, rained on, blown down by the wind, rode hard, and put away wet, right? So, it might be looking a little bit ragged. This is what your customer noticed. So, here's the thing. Remember that even though you were up at dawn yesterday harvesting, washing, packaging, and pricing, you grabbed a few hours of sleep before you got up, you loaded the truck, you drove all the way into the market, you hauled everything out, you set it all up, and now it looks like it's going to rain all day. Well, your customer was probably not that busy. In fact, chances are good they had a really good dinner last night. Maybe they went to a movie, and maybe they went to see the new movie Chef, which is sort of getting pretty good reviews amongst my foodie friends. At any rate, they probably got a decent night's sleep. They probably got up early enough in time to flip through Bon Appetit or Gourmet looking for the perfect menu for tonight's dinner. And, of course, they're going to expect you to have all the ingredients for when they stop by. So, of course, they're going to notice things that you might not notice. And this is especially true for shoppers that may be new to the market. And remember, this is one of the things you have to remember is even though you come every single week to the same market, and sometimes you even set up in the same place, every week there's a subset of people who've never been there before who are seeing everything with brand new eyes. All right, so back to the display piece. So it looks fresh and appealing. People will be drawn in, right? So, you want to make sure that your canopies and your table covers and your umbrellas are clean, because really, nothing says walk on by more than having dried bird poop on your umbrella or your awning, right? Mid-season is a great time to switch up your color scheme, so if you've been using the same tablecloths, maybe switch up something else. Maybe start thinking about more yellows and reds and greens, and or maybe some fall, autumn colors, and start getting people sort of jazzed about what's coming up. Check on your signs to make sure that they haven't been rained on and that they're all smudged or that they're all dog-eared from being packed and repacked and unpacked and put away damp and everything. So just make sure things look fresh and clean and tidy because it makes all the difference in the world. And these are things that you might actually want to get a fresh set of eyes in. So if you have a friend or a relative who's capable of being brutally honest with you, you might ask them to sort of do a walk-by assessment and see what they can see and what jumps out at them. Baskets always be clean and in good repair. And, of course, make sure your product is abundant and beautiful and well-presented because that's your ace in the hole. That's the thing that differentiates you from the grocery stores and every place else is that your stuff is really fresh and homegrown and you're dialed into looks and taste and all of those attributes that the big food system at large can't compete with. I also want to say just a word about overabundance, which is not something I ever talk about to people at the early part of the year, because usually there's just not enough stuff to be overly abundant. But one of the things you want to be aware of is that because you've got bushels and bushels of green beans and you want to move them, you want to be cautious about throwing bushels and bushels of green beans out and overloading your market space. It's better to keep everything fresh looking and just keep restocking throughout the day rather than throw everything out up front. It would be easier on you, but it sort of does overwhelm the shopper a little bit. Shoppers will be so captivated by what you have that they will forget to obsess over the things that you don't have. Well, that's not really true. They will still obsess about the things you don't have. But the more you have to distract them with what you do have, the less chance that you're going to have to listen to them go on and on and on about the fact that peas are no longer producing. And once you've got their attention, you're positioned to convert lookers to buyers, which is really what the bottom line is all about in direct marketing. And speaking of prices, this is a great time to adjust your prices if they need adjusting. If you haven't made any changes throughout the year, if you need to raise prices, do it. If you need to switch from selling by weight to selling by unit, now is a good time to make these kinds of changes. If you have a lot of something to move, offer bulk prices and canning specials. Again, I wouldn't suggest you move it all out to the front of the display, but I would put a nice little card by the cash register or by the entry point and say, home canners, ask us about our bulk specials or ask us about our canning specials, because that can help you move an awful lot of product, particularly during a time when everybody's got a glut of something going on. It's also a great time to start setting folks up for what's coming and what will be going away. So this is the time, this is that teachable moment for people to say, yes, we may not have spinach anymore because the weather's been too hot. Or yes, the peas have gone away. We hope they come back later in the fall. They may or may not. It sort of depends on the weather. But regardless, here's the stuff that's coming up. Here's the things you've been waiting for. Here's the fresh tomatoes. Here's the fresh corn. Here's our winter squashes will start coming in. Berries that you may have. So always be setting people up for what's ahead, and that just sort of mentally and psychologically discourages them from looking backwards and sort of keeps them focused on the future, which is really what you want to do, because you want to build that sense of anticipation. So you want to build a culture of regular, loyal customers who are going to come back and see you every single week. And I'll just stop for a few seconds and just remind folks that if you have tips of yours that have worked particularly well, or if you have questions or comments, or if I'm using a phrase you don't understand, please feel free to type it into the chat box at any time. We can scroll back and take a look at that. Okay, so here's a little secret from grocery stores or local co-ops or anybody that sells food, at a large retail outlet. Every once in a while you go in there and every single thing you knew exactly where it was because you go there every single week, and now all of a sudden everything's moved around in a slightly different place. Yeah, we hate that. As shoppers, we do hate that. But here's the thing. Here's the thing that is so annoying. Why do they do it? Because it causes sales to increase. It's true. Stores, depending on what they sell, can see a 5 to 25% increase in sales following a reset. So why would that be? Well, there's two things that are going on. The first is that it does result in some impulse buying, because you get into a groove. I do it. I'm sure you do it. Your customers most certainly do it. We go to the same place every week. We shop around. We start picking up the same stuff. We kind of get into autopilot because there's a whole bunch going on that I'd rather do than grocery shop, at least in my family. So, but one day you go in and you grab your usual generic plain old yellow mustard and you look down in your hand, and instead there is something completely different. Maybe it's this wine-infused country-style Eau Dijon mustard or something, or maybe it's a bottle of pickled, pitted Kalamata olives or something. Doesn't matter. What matters is that all of a sudden a pretty high percentage of shoppers see that brand new item, and even though it's not on their list, even though it's not something they ever imagined that they wanted to buy, they're putting it in their cart and they're taking it home. And that's not a bad thing for you. So then they start looking around and they realize that everything is in a different place, And even though the facility, the footprint of where they are is the same, things have been moved around. So psychologically, your eye starts to land in different places, and it starts to see things that people haven't seen before, and they're like, maybe I should try that. Who knew there was this many different kinds of jams, or that, there would be this many different varieties of cabbage to choose from. So the fact that you've sort of shaken them out of their complacency is, yes, a little bit frustrating to some of them, but they will get over it, and chances are you may actually, in fact, see a bump in sales. The second bump that you will see will come from new customers, because all you have to do is move things around a little bit, push something that used to be in the front to the back and bring something new up to the front, and you automatically catch the eye of new shoppers, because people, especially your market regulars, they get into patterns. They go to the market. I mean, I certainly do this. I know pretty much where some of my market vendors are going to be, and I think, I'll just run to this one and get the eggs, and I'll run to that one and get the chicken, and I'll run to this one and get the tomatoes, and I hope they have corn over there. So what some markets do is they actually shift vendor locations, which is the ultimate reset. But even if that's not an option in your market, or you don't want to go there, and there's certainly reasons to be argued on both sides, just switching up the way that your particular vendor booth is set up can actually do quite a lot of good in terms of catching people's attention and getting a whole new shopper. And you'll notice as you reset it, and just sort of keep an eye out, because by now you know who your regulars are going to be. And you'll see some new folks start to blend in, and that's a good thing. Your regulars will grumble a little bit, but they'll stick with you because they love you. Your challenge is to get the new folks to fall in love with you too. So just remember, your job is to become the fancy jar of mustard, not the same old, same old. Tasting. Okay, I cannot say enough about tasting. Anybody who's ever heard me is probably sick to death of it, but the reason I keep harping on it is because it works. Tasting sells product. If you live in an area or at a market where tasting is allowed, then you must find a way to do sampling. Do it well, do it carefully, and do it with great intention, but do it, because it makes a huge difference. So here's just a couple of tips for sampling. First of all, sample things that you have a lot of on hand. Sampling is about increasing sales. There should be a direct correlation between the two things. Now, I've seen people sometimes start to do samples because it's a product that they personally love, but they don't have a lot of it in stock. So what happens is they sell out after the first hour. It's like, well, maybe you should have been sampling the thing that you had bushels and bushels and bushels of that you really wanted to move, even though it maybe isn't your favorite thing. So keep an eye on sort of what you need to move that day and sample accordingly. Sample things that you're trying to develop a market for, strange or unusual things that shoppers might not be familiar with. That's another good thing to do. Kohlrabi has been sort of one of the markets I go to regularly, has been sort of introduced this year. I know, we're a little bit behind in the Northeast, but anyway, I cannot tell you how many kohlrabi samplings we have seen, and it's working because I see people going home with it in their bags, which is way different than I used to see last year or in past years. So that's another thing is, the things that people may not be familiar with. Next is, link your samples to your sales. So feature a special price or offer a discount for purchasing in quantity for the things that you're sampling, and have them right there at hand so that people can make an immediate mind, mouth, eye connection, because that's what you really want to do. So control your samples, though. Have someone there. Do not just put out a plate of something and walk away, because I promise you it will be like locusts descending upon you. So you want to always be in control of your sample. Have somebody there to hand out samples, even if you have to drag a friend or a teenager or something to the market with you just to do that piece. Don't leave them unattended. I have one farmer that generally works the market alone, so he keeps the samples by the cash register, but that doesn't work out all that well because it creates a bottleneck in the one place in the stand where you really don't want lines, and that's people waiting to pay and get out. So I highly recommend that you move your samples away to the side and have a separate place sort of set up for people to actually do that sample, and then keep it away from the cash register or the cash out place, because once people have made their selections and have their wallets out, you want to separate them from their money as quickly as possible and move on to the next people in line so that you don't have that sort of long line. And of course, keep everything clean and sanitary and have a trash can nearby, because if you don't have a trash can and you have those little sample cups or toothpicks, I promise you they're going to end up in your neighboring vendor's display box, or they're going to end up in your display box, or they're going to end up on your display table, or any place you don't want them. So and I'm not saying that won't happen if you do put out a trash can. I'm just saying, at least if you have a trash can handy, there is some segment of the people of that will find the trash can and use it appropriately. So I see we've got a question about somebody roaming with samples around the market, which is, a really good idea. I like that. You want to make sure that you're sampling things that you have a lot of, and that the person that's actually doing the sampling for you is knowledgeable about the product and can talk a lot about how it was raised, what it's used for, how versatile it is, how do you store it, what's the shelf life of it, all those questions, because people will want to know everything. So good idea, especially like in smaller markets where, maybe a bunch of people may have watermelon, for example. Doing a watermelon tasting can be really kind of a fun event that can help a lot of vendors. Okay, so that's my 2 cents on marketing, and you'll notice that the picture that I showed on the right is a little bit sticky and a little bit messy, and that's, one of the reasons that I say have somebody there who's going to manage it for you, because you want somebody with a clean plate, or at least paper towels and wet sponges to be able to yank that plate out of there and clean things up periodically. Otherwise, especially with things that are sticky and sweet, what happens? You end up with a lot of wasps buzzing around. Nothing says, let's move on to the next thing, like a whole bunch of hungry wasps buzzing around people's heads. So, be mindful of your tasting, your samplings, but by all means, if you're able to do it, take advantage, because it's a huge opportunity. Okay, so as I said back at the beginning, that there are a percentage of people, and some of you may be listening, and some of you may be the market managers, and I'm sorry, I don't really have anything that can help you unless you've got sort of an assistant market manager in your pocket. But there is a percentage of people by this time in the season who are seriously burned out, and I say that jokingly, but I don't mean to, because every one of the tips that I just shared with you are entirely doable if you have the energy and the capacity to get it done. But if you're really burned out, if you're exhausted, if you're at that I can't take one more thing tired, then everything I said today sounds absolutely overwhelming and impossible. And what you really need to do then is step back and give yourself a timeout. Customers can sniff out burnout from 100 yards away. So if you're feeling frazzled and sick and tired and just overwhelmed, it's going to show. No matter how good of a face you put on it, it's going to show. And it's way better to take a week off, give yourself a break, and come back rested and stronger than trying to tough it out. And I say that knowing that we probably have some market managers there who are saying, "Oh my God, don't everybody take the same week off." Don't worry, that probably won't happen. But if you're going to do it, now is a really good time when everybody is sitting on a lot of product, and it can really help you out. So, if you have an employee or a partner or a family member or even a good friend who can come in and cover for you, that's terrific. But if you don't, it's better to take a break, accept the loss of income from 1 week, and come back strong the next week rather than to keep trying to push through, because you just can't push through that kind of burnout tired that happens. But here's the thing. If you decide to give yourself the gift of a week off, you can't sit at home feeling guilty about not being at the market. And this is what I see people do all the time. They sit home and calculate all the money they're not making, how they let the manager down, how they let the farm down. You got to let go of it. You made a decision, And feeling guilty about it is just going to make everything worse. So treat yourself to a day, a nap, a massage, a yoga class, go fishing, read a trashy novel, sip lemonade in the hammock. Do something, but whatever you do, make it about recharging your battery so that you can come back the next week and be that, fun-loving, scintillating, chatty, witty person that people want to see at the market when they come. So you're giving yourself the gift of the day, so make it worth the price that you're paying, and that's what I have to say. So this sign always makes me laugh. I saw it at, where did I see it? At a farmer's market, actually, in Alabama, I think. But if you take a week off, it's not the end of the world. If you have a strong customer base, they'll miss you, but they'll survive and they'll come back. I just went to one of my favorite markets this summer, and I had 3 things on my shopping list, and every single one of those people wasn't at the market, or 2 of those people were not at the market, and the one that was there didn't have the thing that I wanted from them. So, but I still found plenty of things to buy, and I'll go back next week. I just postponed some of the things I was going to do and moved it to next week. So we're just about out of time for this month, and I want to leave time for questions or comments if anybody's got any. But just to sort of recap quickly, it's not too late to turn a so-so market season into a winning one. In fact, this is about the best time there is to start re-strategizing and going back at it and really turning things around. It's all about appearance, attitude, and observation. The appearance is your display. Make it look nice. The attitude, well, that's yours, and the observation is about tuning into the ways that your market demographics are starting to change with the seasons. Notice the little things and adjust. So I hope we have a couple of minutes here. Yeah, we do. We have a couple of minutes for comments and questions, and I would love to hear what your thoughts are. I know I talked really, really fast. Is there an easy? Yes, Tina, there is an easy. There are a couple of really good resources for doing sampling, and I did not post those, but I will pull those links together and get them out to you. In terms of the rules and regulations, that's a little bit trickier. These are more like best practices because the rules and regs change with the state and even the municipality that you live in. So your manager is probably the best person to give you the most accurate information, but I do have a couple of really nice resources that have best practices. And our friends in Washington State, I think, also have a couple of really great resources about direct marketing. And I will make sure that we post those on our site along with the archive of this as well, so that we'll try to get you some supplemental resources. Yes, Margaret makes a good point. As some of the rules and regulations and policies are determined at the local level, so in some places it's the health department that will do that. In our state, it gets even more complicated because it's only the health department if it's a value-added product. But, it's always best to be cautious around sampling, regardless of whatever the rules are. I keep those best practices in mind. Keep it clean, keep it sanitary. Mind your, it's a lot of it is common sense. I mean, the last thing you want to do is sample a product and make people sick. That sort of defeats the whole purpose. So Anne's got some tips up there. So things that can't, okay, excellent. Ree's got a question about the things that can't be sampled, like crafts and things. Well, it just so happens that I have a couple of friends who are in the craft business, and I know we're out of time, but I'll just answer quickly, is you can still do little tiny free sample things and give something away. Giving something away is like a secret weapon into somebody's heart, and it doesn't have to be expensive. It can be some little thing that, like a keychain that is when you actually sell. I have a friend who makes these like elaborate macrame plant hangers, from the 60s, which are making a comeback. But anyway, she does little keychains that she just gives away. And she does them all winter, and she ends up with, 500 or so, and she throws them in a basket and she hands them to people as little freebies. So I think that's one good way that you can substitute sampling. You can also have demonstrations. People love to see how crafts are made. So, or you can have mini soaps. I mean, I have some soap vendors who give away little soap chips sometimes, just to try to say, here, why don't you try, here, thanks for buying 3 bars, here, why don't you take this, here's a fragrance that you didn't try. Or somebody who comes in and doesn't buy, but who might be a regular, you just give them a little free something. That helps. So I see, Lisa, that we are out of time. I put my email on this, and you will obviously get it as well, so feel free. It's just mary.peabody@uvm.edu. I'm happy to take questions anytime. I love talking about marketing. Please, if you didn't already, feel free to download the things. And I was delighted to see this many people here. So I hope you all have a terrific rest of your day and the rest of the season.